Hey chess fans, I am back with another game analysis based on a game that I played and once again got crushed because that's my favorite thing. But this one comes from the Two Knights, and this was the branching point where we left the ChessGoals repertoire. The most common move that I face and the move that we cover in the course is this bishop to b3. But there's another idea that I have played a couple of times now, and it's this bishop to d3 idea, and it's quite an interesting maneuver. So what's the idea is that they're going to fianchetto this bishop because they've blocked in the e-pawn, and they're just going to go full scale attack on the king side. They already have a knight on e5. They're going to aim both bishops at us, and it's scary, and there's problems. So the best way to continue is to play queen c7 first, and our idea is we're actually going to leave this bishop here for a bit, and we're going to develop quickly and try to trade off this this light squared bishop. So b3, and then we play bishop b6, bishop b2, castles, castles, and then here is the start of a good idea. And I did remember this when I played the game. I played knight to d5, and the only reasonable move is f4, or that's the most common move. The idea is that the rook is uncovering to defend this f4 square because we threaten knight f4. And if we can get rid of this light squared bishop, we're pretty happy. So after f4, our idea is f6. And we're kicking the knight, but not just kicking the knight. We're also blunting this bishop here, which is a nice idea. So here in my game, my opponent played queen to h5, which is actually not best and sort of what we're hoping for. Against that, we played g6. And this looks totally nuts that we're just like shifting all of our pawns up in front of our king, especially when all these pieces are raging against us. But it actually works out quite well if you followed up correctly, which I miscalculated at one point. We'll get to that. Our point is we're kicking this guy, and we're also allowing the queen to defend laterally, which is one of the reasons why we played that early queen c7 and left the bishop at home. Another reason is that there's sometimes where the defending this pawn on e6 becomes important, because notice this pawn is not really well protected right now, and it is on a half-open file. So there's two ways to continue, and the best way is to play bishop takes. I did look at knight takes after the game, and the idea is we're going to capture back here, and then after bishop takes, we have this nice move, knight to f4. And we're forking these pieces, and really the only way that white has to continue their attack is to sacrifice. And so we'll just grab that rook, and I mean, right now, we're up a whole rook. And we're down, okay, a whole rook for a pawn. But this is still kind of dangerous, and there's still some play here. Bishop to a3 is the most active, and the computer best reply here is actually rook to b8, which seems ridiculous. I suppose the idea is that we're going to try to push b5, and the point is that white doesn't really want to take this rook, but after rook b8, we sort of force them to, and then they can give this check, and we can go run and get out of the checks. But I thought rook to d8 was far more natural. Rook to f1 would be the follow-up. We just play e5, defend this guy. G3, trying to kick the bishop. And now it's important that we don't actually defend the bishop, that instead we play bishop to e6. If we try to defend this bishop, we can actually get into some trouble. So, for example, say you play bishop to g5. Well, then h4 comes, and okay, fine, let's go try to take a pawn. But then now rook f6 happens, and there's big problems. So we can't actually justify moving the bishop off of f4. So we're going to give that back and play bishop to e6. Nothing better than to gain back the piece. We're still up in exchange. Remember, we were up a whole rook, and now we're up in exchange. But we can play rook takes d2, and after he grabs this pawn, trying to open up the f-file, well, we're just going to play queen to b6 check. The king needs to skirt out of the way, and we can play bishop to d5 check, which now we foresee why that bishop to e6 maneuver was so good. And I think it's clear now that we're going to start taking over the game. We do need to be careful we don't get ourselves mated, but because of the bishop still defending this square. But we are covering the f7 square at least, and this attack's going to die quite nicely here. So bishop to g6 is the way that the game continued, and I took the knight, which is, again, correct. So far, I've played this perfectly, thus far-ish. So He takes back here, and I spent a ton of time here. And there's only one move that holds the advantage, and I looked at it, and for some reason I didn't play it. I looked at several moves. I even considered this move, which after takes, they have queens at g4 check, and he's going to pick up the knight, and then maybe the bishop, and doing better. And plus, this is going to come open. This doesn't look good at all. So instead of what I eventually ended up playing was I played queen here, and I looked at like this, and I thought he had to trade queens. And if he trades queens, then I'm honestly doing pretty okay. Like we're a little bit better, not great, but a little bit better. The problem is, and this is a big problem in my chess thinking, is that he doesn't have to trade queens at all. After just queen to e5, this is really hard to stop. It's real tough to stop. In that there's really just no way to really stop it without giving back a huge chunk of material, major problems. So that's where I went wrong. The other move I looked at and discarded for some crazy reason is bishop to c5. And the point is, I looked at d4, and I was thinking about playing bishop back to b6, but I shouldn't play bishop back to b6. The point is, I'm going to take this guy. And after he takes here, I play here. And if he wants to win the piece, now he really does have to trade queens. And we take here, and he takes back, and we're still up a whole piece. And the queens are off the board, and we're safe, and we're happy. And this is the best way that you can possibly go. It's much, much, much stronger. And we have an endgame. We're going to play bishop to d7. We should be able to hold back these pawns pretty comfortably. We do have some weak pawns that we can try to go after. If we manage to trade the rooks, we're going to be doing great. And this would have been the best way to handle this position after the bishop takes. But going back, queen h5 was an inaccuracy that you should be happy to see, and gives us a pretty solid advantage. Much better is queen to e4, and this is much tougher to me, and it's crazy sharp. And but I did dig through and pick out a couple lines where we can manage to hold equality in this line. And honestly, if you didn't study this ahead of time, you're never going to find it. So that's why I'm making a video for you, because the move is g5, which is nuts. It seems absolutely ludicrous. Now, the point, again, is that we're defending this h7 pawn, and we're trying to undermine the knight so we can just win it with the bishop and trade this bishop. This is what we want. So there's two ways that white can continue. I looked at both of them. One was knight to g4, which is trying to hang on to the piece, and the other is to play f takes g5. Let's look at that one first, because it seems like fun. Here we do go ahead and we nab the piece, and we're up a solid piece. And if we could just get this guy off the back rank and then bring our rooks over, we'd be doing great. They don't have anything better than to play takes here, and we need to take back with the pawn. We would love to take back with the queen, except for it gets mated. So we got to take back with the pawn, and the best thing for white to do is to trade rooks. They get check, and this allows them to bring in another rook, and they've removed a defender from us. And this still is looking pretty scary, but it's a pretty equal and imbalanced position, and is likely to end up in some kind of perpetual. But you know what? That's life is black. Sometimes you can't always win. King to g8, and then queen to h4, and we play. The point is that they want to bring in the rook and create some havoc here. So we're going to play knight into f4 to try to keep that guy out. We also would like to get rid of this bishop. Really, the best move is g6, which is going to lead to a very similar position. But I looked at bishop to f4 because I thought, well, white probably doesn't want to trade this bishop. We play bishop to b7, getting that guy off. And now after g3, we can play knight to e2. And so white has tried to keep this bishop on the board, which feels natural, but this is going to give us such an opportunity to try to steer the game in a better direction for us. King to h1 is kind of forced, and now we can play c5. And we're going to force that bishop off the board anyway. G6 is really the best reply. There's not anything else. If you play anything else, the tables turn majorly in our favor. For example, let's say they play here, just defending. Well, then we have queen to g7, and the attack is off. We're going to be able to bring our rook in, and we're going to be doing fantastic, and definitely going to make advantage of our extra piece here. So instead, g6, we have to take it, and then the queen comes into g4. The point is that they want to take here and create havoc for us. They also want to take our knight, which is pretty obnoxious. So we play knight to f4. It's the only move, because we have to stop rook to f6. It's also kind of a nice move because it doesn't really help to take it. You can't take it because then you lose your bishop with check. So the queen has to come back to f6, and now we can trade, takes, and we bring this rook across, and we're going to go, we have a rook ending now. This was important to play rook f5 because we don't want to allow this check here. And we've got a rook ending where we're just a wee bit better, and it's a game. We have chances to play this for a win now. So that was knight g4. No, sorry, that was knight x g6. So let's look at knight g4 instead, which again, this is slightly less accurate. It does hold on to the extra. It doesn't give us a piece, so I think there's a chance that white players may be going to go this way. But now we can grab this pawn, and so we are now officially up a bit of material. And the best move is perhaps not that natural for white, but it's c4. And the point is that they want this knight to move. They need this knight to move pretty badly. So we'll take pawns once. They'll grab back. Now it's important that we play e5. And the idea of e5 is, yes, we're giving this knight up, but we're also taking control of this square, which means we're threatening to play f5 sometimes, but also with this defended, we also have some ideas of playing this check and picking up this bishop, which is something to keep an eye open for. Okay, so taking the knight is really the only move, and now we can grab this bishop, which again, we open this line up not just for f5, but to take immediately. White will take here, and now we play bishop back to e6. We want to guard this long diagonal and stop checks and problems from happening along this way. And here, again, we have a game. Material is equal-ish. We're down a pawn. But we're solid. The center's looking great. And we do have some tactics. So something I looked at is if they just make a natural move like rook ac1, trying to defend this guy, well, we just immediately win. We first play f5, which blocks off the mating threat. And they play, I don't know, something, queen a4. It doesn't really matter because there's nowhere to go to prevent what we're about to do. And we have queen b6, and nothing better than to block with the bishop, because if they just move the king out of the way, we're going to go grab. So this is, yeah, and now we're just up a clean piece. We're going to collect this pawn. We're going to be able to hold our pawns. We should comfortably win this position. It didn't have to be that way. It is still just a game with material on the board. So, and no, we're not down a pawn. I can't count. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's not clear who's got weaker pawns, and we're able to handle this pressure. So this is an interesting way for white to play, and it's a little bit scary. But if you take time to learn these lines, you'll be able to handle this position quite well. And honestly, probably the people playing this aren't going to be that booked out. I mean, I've played this game twice, and I've went for this idea twice with knight d5, f6, and both times queen h5 is what was played. And it's actually just a blunder. We're up like +2 if you remember this g6 idea and this bishop c5 idea later, which does a great job of trying to make sure we leave that pawn on d4. Let's go look at that. So leaving this pawn on d4, so shutting this bishop out, is really key. Also, it forces the queens off the board, and we'll be able to go into an endgame and do quite well. Even if they play the right way, we're not worse, and we still have quite a few chances for white to go wrong. White really has to be just as precise as we do, because they're investing quite a bit of material to play this way. And it's complicated and sharp, and a lot of fun. And I look forward to facing this again, because I feel like now I'm pretty well prepared. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, found it instructive, and wish you the best. Thanks a lot, guys. And check us out. Check out links to the course in the description. Wish you the best.